Normal talk?
Yeah, pretty much.
Good evening. This is Scott Randolph, a missionary from Horace Baptist Church to Camp Assurance. In fact, I direct the church camp. Pastor Cook's asked me to share a devotional thought tonight and has given me ample warning because I am known for not being very short-winded. So we're only going to cover 2 books of the Bible this evening. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 31. And as 1 Samuel ends, Saul, the king, is being tracked down by Philistines. And apparently as he's running up a hill, in the process of that, archers are shooting arrows at him and they've hit him. And he realizes that he does not have long to live. His fear, however, is that he'll live long enough that the Philistines will catch up with him and torture him. And so he asks his armor bearer to run him through. But it says in verse 5 of chapter 31, and when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, because the armor bearer refused to kill him, and Saul took his own sword and plunged himself onto it, the armor bearer killed himself as well. And so the great leader, Saul, that was the king the people wanted, the king that they wanted despite the fact they were warned that he's going to take the best of your children, he's going to take the best, he's going to tax you. No, they wanted a king so they could be like all the other nations. This guy that was head and shoulders above everybody else, in the end doesn't die as a great leader, he dies as a guy who's running for his life and even takes his own life. Now in the process of this event, 2 Samuel kicks in chapter 1 with a totally different story of how Saul died. David was in the city of Ziklag. He had not gone out to this war. And it says, it came to pass on the 3rd day that, behold, a man came out of the camp from Saul with his clothes rent and earth upon his head, which meant that there had been calamity. He was showing that he was feeling grief. And so it was when he came to David that he fell to the earth and did obeisance. So he fell down, honoring David, recognizing he was now the king. And David said unto him, From whence comest thou? And he said unto him, Out of the camp of Israel am I escaped. David said unto him, How went the matter? David didn't know. There wasn't internet, there wasn't television, there was nobody to tell him what had taken place. And he said, I pray thee, tell me. And so the man answered, That the people are fled from the battle, and many of the people also are fallen and dead. And Saul and Jonathan his son are dead also. David and Jonathan were the best of friends. On 2 occasions, Saul, in attempting to come to kill David, God had put Saul in a position where David could have killed him instantly. In fact, David had to stop his cousin from killing Saul. And the cousin was so excited about it, he promised, I'll just get him with one blow. And David said, Do not touch the Lord's anointed. God had anointed David to be king, and he knew that he had anointed Saul previously to be king. David said, It is not my place to end Saul's reign so I can take over. God will put me on the throne when God is ready for me to be king. He didn't rush ahead. Well, now here this Amalekite comes and tells him what has happened. In fact, he finds out he's an Amalekite. The young man that told him said, As I happened by chance upon Mount Gilboa, behold, Saul leaned upon his spear. And lo, the chariots and horsemen followed hard after him. And when he looked behind him, he saw me and called unto me, and I answered, Here am I. And he said unto me, Who art thou? And I answered him, I am an Amalekite. Interestingly, in 1 Samuel 15, Saul had been told to go to war against Amalek. They had come out to battle and wouldn't let Moses and the children of Israel pass coming into the promised land, coming out of Egypt. And as a result of that, God had said it's time for judgment to fall on the Amalekites. And Saul was given the responsibility to kill all the Amalekites, their cattle and everything about them. Now it sounds harsh for us to hear this, but history has looked back and found that some of these tribes that God commanded these things were so full of filth and degradation and sexual perversion, and God wanted to make sure these people would not cause Israel to fall into idolatry. Also, they had turned their back and spurned God, and they had rejected God's people the proper opportunity to quietly go through the nation of Amalek to get to the promised land. So God now is punishing them. Saul didn't kill the king. The best of the cattle were kept. And Samuel had to come to Saul, and when he came to him, he was greeted by Saul, who said, "I've kept the commandment of the Lord." Saul said, "What's the bleating of the sheep in my ears?" In other words, I can tell you're lying to me. You didn't keep God's promise. And that was when the prophecy that the kingdom would be rent from Saul and given to a neighbor of his that was better than he. And we understand that to be David. An Amalekite had been left alive, and that's who this young man is that comes. David, in hearing this, and hearing that this Amalekite, who, by the way, has brought the crown of the king of Israel to David, who now is, by all accounts, going to be the new king, you would think, and I'm sure the Amalekite fella did, think that David would be happy to get the crown, that he would be excited that now finally his father-in-law Saul is off the throne and David can take what's rightfully his. However, it says, "Then David took hold on his clothes and rent them, and likewise all the men that were with him, and they mourned and wept and fasted until even, for Saul and for Jonathan his son, and for the people of the Lord, and for the house of Israel, because they were fallen by the sword." They did not rejoice that Saul had died. They instead mourned because the king that God had anointed had died. In all this, David shows a pattern, that it's God who raises men up, and that we don't rejoice just because an enemy is defeated. In fact, even though Saul was David's enemy, he was also his father-in-law, and Jonathan, Saul's son, was David's best friend. But Jonathan, a faithful man of God, knew that David would be the next king, and had already given him of his armor, of some of his equipment, which was kind of a way of saying, I know that you're going to be the one who follows my dad on the throne. So David and his men mourned for the loss of these heroes of Israel. But then in verse 13 of 2 Samuel chapter 1, David said unto the young man that told him, "Whence art thou?" And he answered and said, "I am the son of a stranger, an Amalekite." David said unto him, "How wast thou not afraid to stretch forth thine hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" I have a feeling the Amalekite all of a sudden got very, very scared. Because now David is looking at him as, "You killed the king. What right did you have to do that? And why did you come here so freely to make this announcement in the presence of I and my men?" And David called one of the young men and said, "Go near and fall upon him." And he smote him that he died. So David, in his first act as the new king, put the man to death that killed his predecessor, the man that thought he would be given riches and honor because he brought the crown to David. But I want you to understand something that David did here. He knew what God's command was. And David was determined not to make the same mistake that Saul did. And so he destroyed the Amalekite as God had commanded. David said unto him, "Thy blood be upon thy head, for thy mouth hath testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed." You know, sometimes people will get the idea that if I do this for somebody, or if I try to help them harm somebody else, that they'll think better of me. Maybe it's by gossip or bad-mouthing or trying to put someone else in the church down, thinking this will put me on so-and-so's good side. In the local church, there shouldn't be anybody's side. And hopefully, in situations that may come up like that, where somebody is saying something and we realize they're running a friend down, or maybe running down somebody that I don't like that well, will still have the courage to say to them, don't speak against another church member. And if they're speaking against the pastor, it's probably a good thing to bring them right to the pastor and say, dear pastor, I just want you to know this brother has something that he feels like you need to hear. And leave it right there and let the pastor hear what this fellow thinks he needs to hear. And then don't be surprised if the story changes really fast. Well, I hope you have a good evening. We haven't eaten yet, and we're going to, and it smells good. I hope that very soon we'll all be able to be back to church, though I understand the governor today says we're going to have to not be meeting through May. We're still planning on running Camp Assurance and having things going full bore beginning the 4th of June with the staff coming in. And I hope you'll pray that we'll be able to do that. There are a lot of kids that need to come to Christ and hear the gospel. There's a lot of our Christian kids that they also need to be encouraged and strengthened. And I hope you'll pray for Keith and Stephanie and their children and Deb and I and our kids. And God would give us wisdom to use these days to the best of our ability. You might pray as well that when the time comes and we find out that we can open up for the summer, that parents will be quick ready to get kids registered. In fact, we had 2 or 3 families registered in the last 24 hours for summer camp. We're looking forward to seeing many more. We want to always have Camp Assurance be a fun place, preparing people for eternity, and your prayers help make that possible. God bless you. I hope you have a good evening.
Hi there. We're going to come back and do some songs in a little bit. So please stay by your phone somewhere, and we'll enjoy some good times together. We're going to sing 3 songs, maybe 2 or 3 different times. We'll make some videos. So just hang around with us.
Probably a half hour, 45 minutes? What do you think?
Yes, after we eat. So we're probably looking at about somewhere around 7:20 to 7:30 for our next time. So thank you. See ya.